it's like not getting a phone when people say, oh, I don't have a phone, or I got a flip phone. And it's like, well, great. That's awesome that you've decided to remain a dinosaur. And maybe that's how people feel about me with the data thing. I don't know. But like, I look at the data thing and I don't think it's as compelling. And maybe it would be different if I was looking for a job. Maybe I'd feel like, oh, I really got to be, I've got to become like a force plate genius because I know I'm going to get quizzed on that by the management people. What I know, particularly from having worked at the professional level, is that one, the guys don't love the data. And in some cases, the guys don't like to be tested because they feel like data is going to be used against them in contract negotiations and things like that. It's I guess, easier to statistically show decline when you have data. You really need to have coaches that guys trust if you're going to get the job done.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 411 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. I'm Anthony Rana. I'm your host. This week we have on Coach Boyle. We had a great conversation about from kind of an article he did. It's really, I guess he's going to probably eventually make an article, but it was just a post on the forum on strengthcoach.com. It was called The Value of Experience, and it was basically about the reliance that coaches have on data and how we've shifted away from really good coaching, from good observation, listening, communication, understanding what our clients or athletes want. It's actually a great follow-up to last week's episode with Todd Durkin talking about coaching greatness. And so Coach Boyle and I kind of expanded on this, and I asked him about really some suggestions about being a better coach. So how he would kind of start to frame that away from this kind of idea about data. So, really enjoyed that conversation, and we kind of added a little bit towards the end about another forum post and how that kind of related to this idea. All right, I just got back from Chicago. I was at the first Perform Better Summit. It was amazing. Great presenters. They've really added some new stuff too, kind of really a little bit more interactive, where definitely have a better social media presence, but there's some more stuff going on. There was definitely a buzz in between sessions, and it was a lot of fun. And you can see some of the new guard, changing of the old guard into the new guard with a lot of new presenters, and they did this same thing. They opened up Thursday and had 3 business talks. And then Friday and Saturday were the lectures and the practicals. With the networking room is back. Chris did that last year and got a lot of great feedback, and people were kind of jumping on that. I was in one of them with Nick Winkelman and everybody. There's a lot of people utilizing this to kind of network or just ask the presenters questions. So each room had, every time they did it, each hour, there were 2 or 3 presenters that were available for your questions or just to go say hi to them. The social was on Friday night. Kevin Hirchin was on guitar. Lots of great, a lot of fun at the social as always. And they're doing deals. So you can, they had a thing, my friend Brian Sipitz was there with his team from Advantage up in Ann Arbor. And basically he had a bunch of people, and hey, it's one price. You have to go on performbetter.com. I'm not sure exactly what the price was, but they're also running deals like bring a friend for free. So check out performbetter.com for the summits coming up. Let me just see the dates. It's Long Beach is July 17th and 19th, and Providence is August 14th to the 16th. But you can check it all out at performbetter.com. Let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, guys, now it's time for the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle, brought to you by strengthcoach.com and nbsc.tv. Strengthcoach.com, articles, videos, and one of the longest running forums in strength and conditioning. I'm still on it. It's still vibrant. And we're going to talk about a really good, actually a few topics today from the forum. You can try it out for 7 days for free. Go to strengthcoach.com for your free trial. Also nbsc.tv. Basically get to be a fly on the wall at NBSC staff meetings. Not right now. They're done with those in the summer. Program seminars and in-services from top coaches. You can try that out for 7 days for free at nbsc.tv. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing great, Anthony. Living the good life up here on Plum Island, so I can't complain.
I know
A
it's
little cloudy today, but
all right. Still got your corner chair, your view of the water, and come on. Uh, So, Coach, great. I thought it was interesting. You put up the value of experience on strengthcoach.com, and I wanted to see where you're going with this. You kind of set up this whole dystopian strength coach society where basically a sports world utterly reliant on technology, catastrophic failure comes, and we can't get into our no force plate, no miles per hour, no distance covered, no trim, and then so teams realize that coaches need to coach without data, and coaches would have to talk to players and make decisions with their eyes and their intuition, and so they needed to find this different kind of power, the power of human connection. And obviously, anybody that knows you've been talking about this forever. I mean, if anybody knows what your favorite book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, or one of them, one of your top ones. And so you've been talking about this for a long time. And you talk about in this article that they had to rediscover the fundamental processes of things like progressive resistance, the power of observation, and the power of conversation. Just set this article up for everybody, or really, it wasn't an article yet. It was kind of a like a post on the forum. So
I just posted it on the forum, and I'm thinking about putting it out as an article, but I just sort of wanted to throw it out there to see what the reaction to it was. So obviously, it piqued your interest, so that's a good sign. It's taken from, and I don't know where I heard the story, but I pulled up, I typed in and got the AI version because basically the story is just about computers, and all the computers go down, and they're actually in search. They hear a story of there's an old guy who can do math, and everybody goes off in search of this old guy who can do math because they realize that they don't have anybody who can actually calculate anything in their head or add or subtract or multiply or divide because they've become so reliant on the computer. And then I said, I'm going to rewrite this kind of from a coaching perspective because I really think this is the sad direction that the coaching field is going in. And so just for me, it's sort of the cautionary tale. And I'm hoping 10 years from now, people will look and be like, wow, Mike Boyle called this, 10 years ago and saying that, they were going to start hiring coaches again because everybody got too reliant on technology and they didn't have, because what I know, particularly from having worked at the professional level, is that one, the guys don't love the data. And in some cases, the guys don't like to be tested because they feel like data is going to be used against them in contract negotiations and things like that. It's I guess easier to statistically show decline when you have data. And you really need to have coaches that guys trust if you're going to get the job done. So I just kind of tossed it out there. You know me. I like the trial balloon every now and then. So I'm hoping
interesting,
we'll get people to go on and read it.
interesting that you're like, yeah, I got it from AI.
Well, it was because what I typed in a story of searching for a man who can add after all the computers go down or something like that.
Oh,
'Cause
okay.
I haven't been able to find, like, it was in one of those, like, remember, Michael Port used to have some good stories in his books, and
Yeah.
it's one of those stories that I read somewhere and then I could never find again. But when I typed it in, the AI version came right up.
Yeah.
The AI thing is so
I
interesting
know.
in terms of it just, and I don't know why everybody gets all bent out of shape, but it just makes everything easier, and everything's easier to find. Everything's easier to
Well, ironically, though, isn't that what you're arguing against? I mean, it makes it easier. For some people, they feel like the data makes their job easier. You're talking
yeah,
about what are you going to do without AI and Google in 10 years when it goes down?
exactly. And I think, but in the same way that you're going to need somebody with experience and somebody with knowledge and somebody with memory when all of those things, when suddenly those things are no longer working. And I
Yeah.
guess my thing is that it's like Star Wars, right? You can use the Force for good or for evil. And I think I just feel like, and obviously evil is a stretch in coaching, but I think
Yeah.
that's where we're going. Because what I see now, and I heard this from, and I won't say, but I heard it from someone within a professional sports organization who said, my job sucks because all I do is collect data now. All the management people want is data, and every week they want me to collect data on all the guys. I don't do any coaching anymore. All I'm doing is jumping guys on force plates and collecting data and crunching numbers and sending reports to management that nobody ever reads. And I don't have time to coach anymore. And I do believe that that's the direction that it's going. And I don't believe, and maybe that makes me sort of the old guy, whatever, but I don't think it's a positive direction. I don't believe, like, if I look at performance or injury rates or any of those things, I don't see anybody who's doing anything particularly impactful with data that they can really show me the difference. Like, oh my God, this is, I got this data and this really made a very, very big difference for us in terms of how we train. I'm just not seeing that. I'm seeing people say, oh, it allows us to maybe tweak things. It allows us to
Yeah.
look at things a little bit differently. But nobody's given me sort of, because if someone gave me kind of the game changer, like, hey, the force plate gives us this, and this is just absolutely revolutionary. Kind of, I always go back to the Tony Harlow thing, but when we really went back to timing, I said, wow, this really does help us to kind of move the needle. But with a lot of the other data aggregation, I don't really see that. I still think that it's, in some cases, it's busy work, and I always call it, whatever, the nerdification or the geekification of strength and conditioning, and we're losing more and more good coaches, and we're seeing more and more data scientists and data analysts, and it's like I'm trying to think of it better. The word I want to use is probably not that appropriate, but it's more of like a management circle jerk kind of thing. That's the only
Yeah.
thing I
Yeah.
can come up with. Sorry, but where you're just producing reports to keep the people above you happy, but it's the people that you're down there with that you need to keep happy.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference. But what's happening now is that the job, you want to keep the job. The job is keep management happy. The job is keep pumping the data at them so they're happy. But then you've got to look back at it and say, wow, are the players happy? Do the players feel like this is productive? And the vibe I get from the players, clearly, it's not a pro data vibe.
And I think we've been trying in terms of, there's people out there like the Joe Ehrman book, Inside Out Coaching, or Nick Winkelman, Language of Coaching. You've been talking forever about personal development, and like I said, how to win friends and influence people first, like understand, or the night, what was the nice, certified nice person, right? All of that stuff. And I think I told you an example. I just got back from the Perform Better Functional Training Summit in Chicago, and I kind of saw a little shifting of the guard, and it was a good thing, and it was a little bit of a bad thing. I mean, I went to Nick Winkelman's lecture, and practical lecture was so good, but it wasn't as crowded as I thought it would be. And then I went to his practical, and there was another practical going on, Ariane Missiner, who is awesome, and I'm not taking anything away from her. But I was kind of surprised, and it just showed you Nick has no social media presence, and no one really knows. Not as many people know about him, but he's been around for a while, obviously. But his stuff is so good. He was talking about coaching and the language of coaching and using certain language, and not just internal or external cues. So it was a really important lecture from my perspective. And same thing with some of the Greg Rose stuff, just really important stuff that I think any coach can truly understand it, and really kind of, not that it's a shortcut, but things that you might be wasting your time on. He was just, what he was taught, and you saw it, Greg, last year in the med ball stuff, whatever. But I think those are things that were assigned to me that, although, like we were talking about this idea about coaching and maybe taking away some of the data, I think it just showed me that, wow, sometimes social media really is important, because I think your numbers will still be the same because you have a great social media presence. These younger people, they know who you are. The coaches maybe that they're following are saying, oh, I love Mike Boyle, or they're sending them that way. If they sent them to those other guys, they don't really have an online presence, so they won't be able to go deeper with them. But it's a really interesting turn, and so I could see that even going in a bad way.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a difference. I think we need to differentiate between social media presence and data because I think they're really different
Yeah.
things too. And I think what happens is I do think if you're not, and I've said this too, if you're not keeping up with your social media presence, you're doing yourself a disservice because I've gone back to the idea. I mean, because you would hear people say, "Oh, I don't do," and it's always like, "I'm not on the Facebook." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you kind of look at someone and say, if you're not on Facebook, you're saying, I'm don't not doing what the other old people are doing because Facebook is an old people thing now, right?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you really look, it's more, what's your Instagram presence like? And and I think that's the kind of stuff that it's like not getting a phone when people say, "Oh, I don't have a phone," or "I got a flip phone." And it's like, well, great. That's awesome that you've decided to remain a dinosaur. But, and maybe that's how people feel about me with the data thing. I don't know. But like,
Yeah.
I look at the data thing and I don't think it's as compelling. And maybe it would be different if I was looking for a job. Maybe I'd feel like, oh, I really got to be, I've got to become like a force plate genius because I know I'm going to get quizzed on that by the management people and because and I just so I think there's two different levels of disconnect. There's a disconnect between kind of coach, player, management in that team setting based on the data. And then I think there's a disconnect between coaches or information providers and audience as far as social media. And I think they're very similar concepts, but a little bit different because I've maintained a really good social media presence and I work at it. And I think because I do know, like, I think that's important. I think that moves the needle in terms of everything that we're doing. It helps us from a local advertising standpoint. It helps us from a sort of a a thought leader standpoint. Okay, you're not. The reality is, if you're not on social media, you're no longer a thought leader. The fact that you wrote a book or that you lectured somewhere is not nearly as relevant as it was 10 years ago.
True. Yeah. And going back to Greg Rose, interestingly enough, he was talking about a lot of data, right? I mean, that's what he does. He looks at data, force plate data, and
Yeah.
kinematic sequence to make better decisions, more informed decisions. So he's using it the right way. He's a great coach, and he's using the data to help him or take those shortcuts or kind of not waste his time with some of these players and find out what are their superpowers and how to kind of keep going with that. But there was another post on the forum. Brian, I don't know Brian's last name, Brian H, but he was asking about working with older like adults. And then he was like, hey, when does the transition happen when you move from being an athlete doing sprints to shifting into more conservative programming? And I love your answer because it's in line with what we're talking about today. You said the body tends to tell you when, if you listen. I think coaches listen with their eyes. I love the quote. What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. Clients that rub joints, try to stretch after sets, etc., are saying that didn't feel right. Often people will initially lie when asked, does it hurt? They do. Question, but their actions don't lie. A simple when for us, and you're talking about the transition, is when you have a job, not as an athlete, we begin to treat you like an adult, not an athlete. So I loved this idea of exactly what you're talking about, is like this idea of that observation and listening. And that's really being a good coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think and it's really funny because the whole adult thing, people get mad and they almost get insulted, like, well, I'm still an athlete. And it's like, you're not really. Maybe secondarily, maybe you are like you might look at yourself and say, I'm still an athlete, Mike. I still play men's league and I go to my
Mhm.
hockey camps and I do that.
Yeah.
But I look at you and think, yeah, but if you got hurt training, would that affect your ability to earn a living? And I think that's the difference between adults and athletes. And even with athletes, really, if you got hurt training, it would affect your ability to earn a living. But the difference with an adult is if you get hurt trying to do something that you're really not getting paid to do,
No.
and then you can't go to your regular job, that's a problem. And people kind of they push back against it, and they push back against it until generally, and I always use the Kevin Carr example because it makes me laugh, but until they get hurt. Kevin wanted to try his hand at powerlifting, and Steve Bunker had said, oh, he had started kind of convincing Kevin, oh, do squat workouts with me, do deadlift workouts with me, and Kevin thought it was fun, and then Kevin hurt his back, and literally he said, and I was crawling around my apartment on my hands and knees trying to get from room to room, and I had to cancel all my clients, and I didn't make any money for a week, and it's like, yeah, so had this kind of sort of dangerous hobby that came back to bite you in the ass. And I think people want to be more fit and people want to get in shape and people want to look better and people want to live longer, but they shouldn't get hurt in the process of doing that. And I don't know how that becomes even a slightly controversial stance, but it does.
Yeah, true. Mike, let's not just complain about, let's go over let's go back to just like some good advice for coaching, because here's the thing, bringing up Nick Winkelman, and Nick and I were talking about the origin of him being on the podcast in, let's say, 2009. And he had done a couple things for me once I met him at Athletes Performance. And he would call me, and then at that time I had strength and conditioning webinars as well, and he would do some webinars on the art of coaching maybe. And that's where I said, look, Nick, one thing that I'm tired of people saying, or older coaches saying, because I'm about 5 years in at the time, I hate it. I'm tired of everyone saying you just need the experience. And what Nick was kind of talking about, no, there's ways, there's better ways. There's a system to being a better coach as well. You still need the reps. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. So talk to us about some things, I mean, that you would say that you're teaching young coaches to be better coaches.
Well, I think the number one thing, and you alluded to it when you read that post, is your power of observation. Looking and saying to yourself, does what the person is doing match up with what the person is saying? Because that to me has always been a really, really big red flag. When someone's benching and you say, how'd that feel? And they're like, it was fine, it was fine. And they're rubbing their shoulder and they're moving their shoulder around, and you're like, but your body is saying that wasn't fine. Your body is saying that didn't feel right. And it usually takes kind of one or two revolutions to get somebody to come back and be like, well, then you get like, well, my shoulder always hurts when I bench. And then I was having this conversation with one of our interns today, and she was like, what do you say to people like this? Because I was looking at one of our hockey girls that was hurt, actually two of them that had, kind of nagging little things. And she said, what do you tell them? I said, well, first thing I do is I think about my does it hurt philosophy, and I try to find stuff. I try to find, and I refer to it as in pattern. I want an in pattern motion that doesn't hurt. So today, for instance, we're doing slide board leg curls. So we're doing kind of a supine glute and hamstring type of exercise. And this young lady is getting a clicking feeling in her IT band. So I think, all right, let's go to bridging and let's see if bridging hurts, because I know bridging is in pattern. It's the same relative pattern, and I know I can progress back to leg curl from bridging, but I can bring it back a little bit and say, is this pain free? And it was pain free. So I'm like, okay, there we go. So it's the ability, and that's why you think about CFSC, Certified Functional Strength Coach. The whole idea is built around progression regression. You get somebody and either they can't do it or they can do it, but it's painful. And then you think, okay, what's my appropriate regression for that? What's my what's my next pattern back that's going to deload that person? Is it, and is it actual deloading? Is it using a band? Is it using a weight stack machine to deload? Is it resorting to an isometric? There's going to be a lot of ways that you can alter the pattern, but you've got to get really good at altering the pattern, at knowing, okay, I want, again, I want upper push. Well, how can I get an upper push that's maybe not bench press, and maybe it's just, okay, let's try close grip bench press. Let's try floor press. Let's try standing cable press, whatever it is. But it's that ability to think on your feet that you're really, I think, trying to develop in good coaches. Good coaches can think on their feet. Good coaches can look and just automatically, okay, that doesn't work, do this. And the athletes are always, I remember that when I was working with the Red Sox, or, I want to do this. I want to add a band to that. I want you to reach this way. And the guys always be like, how does that work? Why does that not hurt? And it's kind of like, you want to say to these guys, well, I really know, like, I understand how the body works. And all I'm telling you to do is make it work just a little bit differently because I know I know what's pressing on what. And I know a way to make maybe that not happen anymore. And suddenly your pain goes away because all your pain usually is. I always use sort of the finger in the door analogy, right? If your finger's in the door, you know, get your finger out of the door, right? It's not that complicated. If you leave it in there and you keep closing the door on it, man, you're going to end up your finger's going to be all swollen, and the more times you close the door on your finger, the worse it's going to get. But if I just say, hey, let's just take your finger out of the door and figure out another way to do this, most people are going to be okay.
I love the listening and observation piece. Similar, like with my approach to interviewing somebody. And I used to early on, very early on, would be think, okay, I gotta, I do all this research, and I've kind of stopped doing that about 7 or 8 years ago. And I have this idea where don't do too much research, don't have too many questions, because I want to make sure it forces me to listen to that person. And then when I listen, I'm able to kind of come up with better questions, or I'm more present in that interview instead of having a list of questions, not listening to you and then waiting and then just answering the questions. And it's very similar with people that I feel like, find out what that person is feeling or wanting or doing. And then when you first meet them, hey, what are you looking to get out of this session? What are you looking to get out of training? What are they looking, not what you're looking to throw
Right.
up on them all your years of whatever. It's like, no, what do they want? And then move from there. And then that's where the X's and O's and all that, all the reading and the, functional training for sports and all the books that you read come in handy. You don't need to talk to them about it, but now you have that whole library in your head and say, okay, we can't do this. Now we're going to do that. You can't do that. Okay, we'll do this. So, but if you're not observing, if you're not listening, if you're not in the moment, you're never going to help them.
Right. You're 100% right. And I think what I find myself is that's why I always write, even when I'm talking to you, sometimes when we're talking through stuff, I'm writing notes because I may be having a conversation with you. And I think if I'm listening to you, it's prompting thoughts for me. And then I'm writing down, oh, what about this? What about this? Maybe I should do this. And and I think it's the same way as an interviewer. You're listening to me talk and you're thinking, okay, Mike just led me to the next topic. Whereas you might, if you had a list of 8 questions, you might have been like, okay, question two. And
Yeah.
and the people listening would be like, wait a second. He just threw out a really good point right there, and you just jumped over it because you wanted to get the question two, as opposed to letting the interview go where it's going to go, move in the direction that it's inclined to move in. And I think that's what you do well. And obviously you've refined that skill, much like you do
Mhm.
everything. But I think you think about, again, for you, you've probably done way more personal development with the what was the guy we went to in Nashville?
Michael Hyatt.
Michael Hyatt. I would say Michael Port. That
Hmm.
stuff's all, but the Michael Hyatt, stuff like trying to figure out, okay, getting better at this is probably, and it probably goes back to the 80-20 thing. It's probably 20% having more knowledge and 80% having more skill to be able to use the knowledge.
Yeah.
Because none of it makes any difference if you can't get the person to do it. And that's so today I'm with my two hockey, one is a high school kid who's super talented, another one's a college kid. And it's like you said, it's questions, questions, questions. Does this hurt? When did it start hurting? Where exactly does it hurt? Because I always go back to the information is power thing. The more information I have and the more I continue the interview, the more I pull the thread, the better things tend to work out because suddenly all of a sudden sometimes you get there and you think, oh damn, I know exactly what's wrong now. I know exactly what happened. It was a perfect example. The guy in the forum the other day, the I think he's from Belgium, the soccer player, who said I started adding 45-minute runs and then my sports hernia acted up. And I thought, well, the reason your sports, I mean, he can't even read his own information because it's in his head. And I'm looking at it and saying, I added 45-minute runs. I didn't add 5-minute runs and progress it to 6 and 7. I added 45-minute runs. And then, wow, next thing I know, my symptoms are back. And it's like, wow, it's super obvious to me what the problem is, but it's not nearly as obvious to you. And that's why, again, when you think, what do you teach people about? We teach people about progression, regression, progression, regression. And then we teach them about progression in training. Okay. Here's our sprint progression. Here's why we're going to start with 5 yard fly in, and then we're going to add 10 yard fly, and then we're going to add 15 yard fly. And all we're doing, right, is we're increasing the stress, we're increasing the volume. It's not very complicated. We're going to do the same thing with conditioning, right? We're going to start with whatever 10 tempo runs, and then we're going to do 12, and then we're going to do 14, and we're just going to increase the volume. And I was trying to explain rehab to this young lady today, the intern that was with me, and I said, rehab really is just about finding that pain-free pattern and then working your way back to where you want to go. So it's kind of, if you're thinking about it from a roadmap standpoint, you're thinking, wow, I want to go back to where I took the wrong turn. And then I want to take the right turn at that spot. And then I'm going to work my way back to where I am now, because I took the wrong path and then it got me to this. All right, let's get back to where we were and then start over, literally, with a better, more thought out progression.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like rocket science, and really it's not. And the thing is that you look like a genius. I know when people come in, and because everybody gets hurt. I could tell you right now, like everybody who I get, like every week, it's a different person who hurt their shoulder, or now their back hurts, or this, and then I'm like, I'll say, oh well, let's do this today, and then they leave, and they're like, you're a genius, and I'm like, I didn't do anything. I really just I had my regression. I was able to find that sweet spot, like you're saying. And when you do that, now moving forward, you made a good point about the idea is just to try. Can you get them to do it? You have to build that trust. And when you start to do things like that, which isn't anything that, oh my god, like life changing, but for them, they were still able to train. We still did stuff. If their right leg hurts, we did upper body. Okay. Do I really need to go to MIT for that one? But, so I think, but kind of being in the moment and understanding some of these things can really kind of move you forward, because otherwise you're just sitting there with your pre-planned program, not moving from it. And nobody wants to be in that situation.
Yeah. The one of the young ladies I talked to today, I was talking to her about treatment, and I said, are they doing soft tissue work? Oh, we've done soft tissue work. We did needles, we did ultrasound, we did, and I'm like, okay, I get it, enough.
Yeah.
And your trainer threw a bunch of crap at it, and it's not better. And my whole thing is, it's literally whatever, cause effect, test retest. I'm going to look at you the next day and say, do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Did what we do help? Did what we do hurt? And it's, as you said, it's not rocket science at all. And I've said this to people, it's amazing. I've been able to do quote unquote rehab with all kinds of super high level elite athletes, and it's nothing more than thinking it through. It was really funny because um, I didn't see the fight, but Kayla Harrison fought the other day, and I remember going to Pedro's judo and watching Kayla limping around, and at judo limping and being like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, I had this." I think she had had a lateral release. Actually, she had had some sort of knee surgery, and I was like, "You got to come by the gym, and we got to get this squared away." I said, "You can't train like this. You can't." She was literally limping through training, and it was just that process of taking her back and saying, "Okay, we're going the does it hurt route. We're going to start figuring out you're not. There's no, because again, judo very tough. Now she's tough. She's fighting, in mixed martial arts at the highest level, so she's a tough kid, but." Toughness doesn't help you in a rehab setting.
Yeah.
It probably hurts you, truthfully. In all honesty, in a good rehab setting, you want someone who's really intuitive, really understands their body, really can tell you exactly like, I'm better, I'm worse, I'm not different. Because that's ultimately what you're looking for, is that someone to be able to look at you and think, okay, we did that, I felt better the next day. We did this, I felt worse the next day. Or we did this and there was no change. So, if you've gotten the better or no change, you think, I can keep going down this path. If you got worse, then you can't. And like I said, I've done it with NBA players. I've done it with NHL players. I've done it with Major League Baseball players. And if you're like, you made up a really good point. If you're listening, not talking, listening, asking questions, listening to answers, you usually will end up in the right place.
Absolutely. And it's not for now because we're going to wrap it up. But what's interesting too is a lot of the conversation on pain. I saw Charlie Weingroff this weekend, Josh Henkin is a lot about the brain. We had Amber Kivet on here. She had recommended a book about, I think it was called Letting It Go. And it was this idea about understanding that pain doesn't have to always be forever. So there's a lot of brain stuff happening. And when you're giving them that confidence, they're like, oh, that felt a little better. Coach Boyle he can help me. Now that makes your job easier because in their brain, they do believe it. So
Right.
it really is a cascade of things that's happening. I think is so interesting, but good stuff, Coach. We will let you go on that. We appreciate you. Thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ant. I appreciate it.